because currently there's about like 200 new games released every day, because mostly on mobile, but still, it's really, really hard to get from the, recognized from this crowd. And the problem is that most of game developers look around the games that they played, that they liked, and build new games around it. So basically, they take the ideas that are already there and try to put up some pieces, change some things, and this is the new game. And actually, it's really hard to say that's a new game. It's just like a different version of them. So I would like to present you a mental exercise that hopefully will make it easier for you to think out completely new ideas for games. And I've already did this presentation 2 times, and I had a lot of feedback from it. And actually, it's a good like a thought experiment and exercise for like abstract thinking. And it's good before after party, because on after party you can talk about it and think new ideas for new games. So let's start with a mathematical metaphor, and let us think about ideas in a more abstract way. So what I'm going to say through my presentation is not exactly like theoretically correct. I was doing this presentation together with my friend who is a doctor of mathematics, and he was helping me out with some kind of problems. And there are still problems with this presentation, but we are trying to solve it and iterate more on that. But still, there are some things that will help you to think about much easier about ideas. So this is the real number set. It's all the numbers on the one-dimensional line of numbers. Okay, so real numbers consist of whole numbers, which is like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's the natural numbers. Then there are rational numbers, which are like one number divided by the other number, for example, like a half, 3 by 4, and so on. Then there are like irrational numbers, for example, like square root of 2, or and there are like more complex numbers, like pi or e. So let's try to arrange all the ideas and associate them with the numbers. And let's say there's like a prime idea and associated with prime number. So this is an idea that comes in a natural form, and people discover it from the very beginning. And I think that every idea and every art form is based just on the scientific evolution of man and based on exploration. So basically, I will talk a little bit more about it. So basically, when humans discovered fire, like how to make it fire, then they could use fire in their art. Or when they first entered jungle, then they could like talk about jungle, make songs about the jungle. Or when they discovered desert, they could like write poems about the desert. And it goes like from the very beginning of human existence to today. So for example, when Einstein has thought about the theory of time and space, then the writers of science fiction could use that. Okay, so let's assign the prime number to each natural idea that was created in this way. So based on the human evolution and scientific research and exploration. And let's do it in a completely abstract way. So for example, let 2 be a dog, let 3 be a car, 5 be a desert, 7 be a modern art, and this is Mondrian. And n is like the gravitational waves which were proven to exist not so long time ago. And there is a finite number of them, so it means that there's infinite number of those, but still they're countable. It means that you can write them down on the, for example, on this wall, each one after another. It will be like a very long wall, but you could still be able to count them. And when you have those ideas, which are like the prime ideas, we can try to mix them, and we need to have some kind of mixing operator, which is a multiplication or product. So for example, let's take a dog and a desert. It's 2 by 5, and we have a desert, which is 10. So this is another number which comes on our set, which is a natural number, but it's made from 2 prime numbers. So every natural number has a unique factorization. Factorization is like when you have the natural number, for example, 3,554, and it consists of multiplication of 11 by 17 by 19. And another example is 120, which is a little bit more complex because in the end we have like 2 multiplied by 2, multiplied by 3, another 2, and 5. So we have 3 prime numbers, 2, 3, and 5, but 2 is used 3 times. So there's like a power of 2. Power is a magnitude of idea. So for example, what's like a magnitude? Let's say that it's like a prime idea, and it's a wound. It's an idea about a wound, which is used like in a normal way. We can see on this picture of a movie that this man is wounded, so probably he may die or he may not, but he's like in this state which is like writes down a story. But then when we multiply this idea of wound, we can bring it a little bit more on the front and use it to exaggerate the story. So for example, there's a Black Swan movie, which the scenes when the main actress is wounded explain her state of mind. So they're like exaggerated a bit. And if we like magnitude it more, then we have like a gore, which starts to be a genre of its kind. So when we multiply the idea and exaggerate it to a state when it's actually the idea becomes a genre. So we need more of those numbers, and in order to have that, we need some kind of inversion. So let's say that 11 is rain. So idea of rain, when we'll use it in our game, it's 11. And inversion of that is, let's say it's 1 by 11. So every inversion of every idea is 1 by this idea. And because of mathematical properties, we have like a distributive property. It means that a dog on a desert, inverse of that, what would be inverse of dog on a desert based on that we have a dog multiplied by a desert? So, an inverse of the desert, let's say it's a grass, and inverse of the dog, of course, it's a cat. It's something that comes first to our mind. Let's not be not too strict about it. Let's say what's an inverse of a dog, and this is something that first comes to our mind. So when we multiply the cat and the grass, we have a cat on the grass, and it's inversion of dog on a desert. Okay, so like exercise about what I was talking before, a game called Super Hot, and they say it's like time moves only when you move, and let's try to inverse that. So let's say it's like time moves only when you don't move, and this is actually an idea for a game. You can use it. So you can take a game that exists, try to inverse that idea, and you may do a really good game. For example, Anomaly Defense by 11 bits is an inverse tower defense game. And by the way, time moves only when you don't move makes sense. We were thinking about that. It's something like, for example, if you have a platformer, and normally the game does nothing when you don't move. But if you're on a platform or in elevator, your move is like constrained by other things, like the environment, and then you move even if you don't want to. So you need to avoid things that move. For example, you need to avoid cars and so on. Rational numbers. So we have natural numbers, like inversion of those, and we would like to complete the set of real numbers by rational numbers. And this is the ratio between two natural ideas. So I was thinking that how this name was created, like rational. So is it because of the ratio, like a mathematical ratio, or it's because it's rational in terms that it makes sense? So all the ideas that are rational are well defined, and this is just a division between two natural ideas. So for example, if we have a jungle and we divide it by the sun, then we have like a night in a jungle. And those rational ideas are still countable, so there's infinite number of those, but we still can put it on the table and count them. And what can we do with rational numbers, and how can we make another game ideas about that? So for example, let's take a shooter game and divide it by the shooting mechanics, so a gun. And then we have like a walking simulator, because in shooting games we normally like walk and shoot, and then we just walk. And this is an example. That game is called Dear Esther, which is really good. And actually it happened this way. So first-person perspective games were actually shooter from the very beginning. Not just like walking and trying to do something. They were shooters from the start. And after so much time, someone decided to do something different about it. And Dear Esther came by like removing those mechanics. Next thing is, for example, if you have like a racing game, and when we remove the challenge of racing, then we have Euro Truck Simulator, which is just about driving a truck. How cool can it be? And it's actually really cool. You need to try it out. So when we have this result of the previous equation, like we have this rational number, which is Dear Esther, and we multiply by another idea, like adding a walkie-talkie talk during the whole walking simulation, then we have Firewatch, which is a nice extension and evolution of the walking simulator genre, and I really recommend that game. And then I would like to present you like more advanced operator, which I call shift operator, and it's used then when you want to completely change a game or like a big idea to something completely different based on just a small difference. And I call it like a twist. So a mechanic twist, for example. So when we have like this 120 number, and as we remember, it's a factorization. Its factorization is power of 2 power 3, and then multiplied by 3 and multiplied by 5. But when we just add 1 to it, then we have a power of 11. And when we subtract 1, then it's like 119, and it's 7 by 17. So there's like completely different ideas based on just a small adjustment, and I call it twist. In games, I think that's the best example for the twist is This War of Mine, where we have a game about war, but we are not the war. We are not the soldiers, but we are the victims of the war. So there's like a twist to a regular idea that a lot of people use. And this is another example. So for example, we have like a cops. We could do a game about cops when we are cops, and we do something like the regular cop job or whatever. And when we shift a little, for example, to cops' wives, then we can make a game about cops' wives, which would be completely different, because it can show like a tragedy of cop wife that just lost his husband because of some kind of operation. And a good example of movies is the movie called Room, when it's actually about a story of two people being held in a room, but it's actually not about that. And I will not spoil it, but it's really, really nicely examples this twist of not concentrating on an idea that was done and done in such amount of times that it gets boring. Okay, so let's skip to irrational numbers. This is like the next part of the real number set. And Euclid called irrational numbers as unsayable numbers or unreasonable numbers. So basically you can write them down to, and it's going to be infinite, like square root of 2 is 1, dot for 1 for 2, and so on. And this is like the roots of polynomials, but they're still countable. So they're countable, and we can say that when we draw them on the on this like the diagram, then we can still see where they are, and it's hard to find pieces here. What's going on here, and we would like to find that. So irrational numbers represent irrational ideas. So something that basically doesn't make sense, but it can be used as an idea for a game. So for example, like glitch aesthetics. The glitch aesthetics are something that normally are being glitches. So nobody wants to use them because they look bad. They look that the programmers or graphicians that were doing that don't know what they're doing, or they're not too good. And for example, the next irrational idea is like a Twitch plays Pokemon, when we have like a Pokemon being played by thousands of people on Twitch, and they're trying to like progress based on an enormous amount of information being displayed on a chat. But we can work with that. So the product of two irrational numbers are still irrational. Like square root of 2 multiplied by square root of 3 is square root of 6, and it's still irrational. But if we will magnify them, then we can make something rational. So if we magnify to 2, then we have 2 by 3, and it's 6. And example of that is the goat simulator, which is based on taking a character which normally doesn't fit too well as being a character as a goat, and then use those glitch aesthetics and bugs in games as a main mechanic. And we have a goat simulator, which is a very, very reasonable game, and I will explain why. So basically, when we develop a game, we have like multiple situations when something breaks. And normally what you do, you bring out your friends and say like, look at this, it's like so funny. And like everyone has this good laugh, but normally it's just reserved for developers. And normal people can see that, so they are like, it's just reserved for a small amount of people. And the Goat Simulator actually showed it to masses, and that's why it's a very reasonable idea. So to complete the set of real numbers, we need the transcendental numbers. This is the remaining part. And this is like P and E. And the funny thing about this is that they are not countable. So there's infinite number of those, and you can't write those on a sheet of paper anywhere because it's like, it's too many. But the funny thing is that they're really hard to find, despite being the biggest subset. So we know P and E, and there are like some small sets of transcendental numbers that humans know about. But when we attach the transcendental number to any number and multiply by multiplying or dividing by them, the whole number becomes transcendental. So basically, if you take any number that I was talking before this presentation and multiply it by P or E, then it becomes transcendental. And let's say that transcendental numbers are representing universal values. So for example, like a happiness or sadness, or being a part of family or being alone. Oh, sorry. So, or represent this universal value as life, like for example in Journey, and or represent the value of like understanding evil. So this is like Apocalypse Now, but it's another version of the root of. Sorry, I don't remember the English name. The Jądro Ciemności. It's the Heart of Darkness. Thank you. It's another version of Heart of Darkness. So I will talk about a little bit about the game that we are creating, which is called Bound, and I will describe like how did we get to the point that we are now. But to be honest with you, it's really hard to create a game based on what I was talking about. It's much better to analyze what we've got now and try to change it based on the operators that I've described, rather than to have a piece of paper and let's put those numbers and this is it, let's divide that. It's really hard to start with that. But when you have a piece of game that is already at some point of development, like after pre-production, then you can write it down. So let's try to do it with Bound. So first, what we have from the very beginning were the universal value, and this is something that we are showcasing Bound from some time, but we never talked about it, what this game is really about. And we've taken the mechanics of the 3D platformer in terms of Mario 3D World, and we divided it by the gaming mechanics. So removed all the coins, removed all the like the task to get from point A to B. And so the first one is the transcendental number, the pi, the universal value. Next is the prime number for mechanics. Let's say it's like maybe it's not a prime number. It's a natural number made of the small prime numbers which made the mechanics of 3D platformer. And then there's this irrational number. The aesthetics of the whole world look like this because we started to make these levels as a design blocks, so like huge cubes. And then I said it's like, oh, it's really hard to see where we are going in that labyrinth, so maybe we should like lit it and make shadows on them so it will be easier. And then we thought it's like, oh, it starts to look cool, so maybe we'll just stay with that. We'll not have to make any graphics at all. And this is how it was made. So basically it was like irrational numbers, like let's use those design blocks to display the whole world. And after that we started to see that it looks a bit like modern art, so we started to investigate more in the modern art oddities, and modern art is a prime number. And in the end we've added a ballet character to the whole game. So the interesting thing is that we've added it very lately. So right now we can say that it's a game with a ballerina, but actually it's not a game about dance, because in the very beginning we have this transcendental number in universal value, but after like making pre-production and first character, we said it looks like in a game. So our character in a game looks like in a game, and it's bad, because there are 200 of games released every day, and it will be really hard for everyone to distinguish it from others. And then I was like my friend showed me a video clip, and there was like a contemporary dancer, and I said, it's like, oh, this character represents our character in a game in terms of emotions, and we should like to do that. And in the end, when we started to do that, we discovered that there is really, really hard to find a game with a dancer as a character. There are games with a dance as a mechanic. So when you dance and make those moves and so on, but it's really, really hard to find a game with a dancer as a character. And think about it, it's like very weird because like dance was with humans from the very beginning, like in caves we were dancing. And then there is no single game with the dancer as a main character. So basically what I was trying to do with this presentation is to show that there are still a lot of ideas that are not used in games because game developers mostly look at other games and not on other medias. And this is like how Bound looks right now. Okay, can you play the movie? Thank you. Okay, so in the end we've added this twist, which I was calling a twist operator, but I wouldn't like to talk about it. Just like to let you discover it after you would try the game, if you would like. So to sum up my presentation, there's a big interest in video games, medium evolution. What it means? It means that this is the right moment to say that video games are being a medium that it's like evolving, and they're trying to bring emotions to the players that movies and books are really try to do that, but it's hard for them. And this is done by mixing ideas or adding or removing places, like doing all those operators that I was talking about. But 99.99%, and I'm pretty sure about that number, of released games doesn't contain those universal values. And think about it that in terms of books and movies, the movies and books that become art in the future represent those universal values. Those values are universal, like to people, like love, or for example, things that are constrained to the times when the book is written or the movie is made. So, for example, like Apocalypse Now. So, games that contain universal values or show the new ideas, those new prime numbers, are watched by industry representatives. So basically we have a lot of games, but there are some games on radar of other developers that are important or interesting because they represent just this tiny new thing that was not existing before. So for example, Superhot. And so if you will factorize your game into those ideas and try to change a little bit of here and there and add new ideas, then you will immediately get attention of other developers. And this is a new target audience. So basically, there's over 5 million registered Unity developers. And let's say that 4 million of those are robots or like accounts that are multiple, and still it's a million, and that's like just half of the whole market share. So let's say there are 2 million of actual developers, like so many. And if you will make a game for other developers, it's still a huge market. So like in movies, we say that there are movies that are just being made for other movie creators, like there are just movies for festivals. In terms of games, it makes sense from a commercial standpoint because there's so many developers. And developers need to learn in order to make games. So they will try to try your game if it contains a new kind of mechanic, because they will need to touch it. They won't see it just on YouTube because they will not feel the mechanics. Or for example, if you have some kind of new graphical technique, they will also not try to see it on YouTube because there are like artifacts of compression and so on. And they search for those tiny new ideas just to use them in their games. So they're trying to mix, and they will just like grab these small tiny ideas to like move it forward. And finally, they are like very active on social media, like to tweet about those new things that they discovered. So basically, in terms of bound, it was very easy to like search for journalists. It was not hard like to search for them or ask them to write about it. They were just trying that by themselves because they wanted to write about something that's different. And that's it. This is my presentation. Thank you. And you can try Bound over there. We have like a VR version, so you can still try it. Thank you.
And if you have questions, just raise your hands and I will pass the mic. All right. Okay.
Hello. I want to ask, when you make or you want to make a new idea for a game, at first you make some hypothetical alphanumerical language, like number 1 is, for example, the dog, number 2 is cat, and so on, and you make the infinite number of ideas, and you just then randomly pick some numbers. Yes, randomly pick some numbers, or how you do that?
So basically, this is the whole example was to help you in understanding those, to like categorize them and write them down, but you don't need to use those numbers. You can like use the whole idea. So you have a character and this background and this music, and this is how she moves or he moves, or this is like our opponents and actually why she or he fights with them, and where is the universal value. So actually, what's the sense of the whole game? And you can put those in words if you like. You can put this down with images. So and try to mix those. You can like cut the pieces of paper and like move it around, or like try to inverse those pieces. And in this case, try to find something new. And how to determine if it's new? You need to try a lot of games. You don't need to stick to just one game. You just need to play everything what goes on and see. It's like, oh, I already seen that one, and this is so boring because I've seen it like 10 times already. So you need to know what was done before.
Any other question? Okay. Yeah. Don't be shy, just raise your hand.
Hi. When you use this type of system or approach, it looks like it's a good way to get really randomized ideas. Once you do that and you get an idea that it can be completely different from anything that exists, how do you establish or if that is good or not? I mean, are you searching for difference just for the sake of difference? Or when you search for something different, you also have a different exercise to understand if that would be interesting for the player or if there would be any added value other than difference for its own sake?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and I've heard it already a couple of times. So basically, based on our previous productions, we discovered that when you have this like a universal value, you still need to try if the player would like to play it. So you need to concentrate on the controls first. So if the controls are transparent, then you are on a good way to show anything what you like. So basically, first you need to make the controls completely transparent, so you don't need to translate it to people. It's like you do this by doing that, you do this by doing that, because they will get like pushed very easily. So first, when you have the controls and interactivity solved, then on top of that, you need to put, you can put other ideas, but it's good to remain this fun factor. So in the best, how to do that? It's like you need to play test. You need to play test all the time. So in Bound, we've made like 60 play tests probably. It's like at some point we were play testing every 2 weeks. So we were adding new pieces and then play test. Adding new pieces and then play test. And then we were seeing like if people are actually enjoying it or they're just like saying, it's okay, I've seen that and I can go.
Any other question? Okay, that's it. Thanks,
Okay,
Michal.
thank you.